Good afternoon and welcome to the Value Economics Show. Happy Monday. On January 20th, 2008, Breaking Bad made its debut on AMC. In what would soon become known as the most iconic television show of the second golden age of television, the world was transported into one defined by Walter White, the lead character in the show immortalized by Bryan Cranston. Walter White, as designed by showrunner Vince Gilligan, had the most unique character arc of any lead character in modern television, turning Mr. Chips into Scarface. White starts the show as a disenfranchised and miserable public school chemistry teacher, a man who is defeated and has since succumbed to the banality and malaise of middle-aged existence. Everything in his life is defined by meaninglessness and spiritual poverty. He lives in the suburbs of Albuquerque, New Mexico. He drives a Pontiac Aztek. His wife demeans and disrespects him. Her biggest displays of affection are arranging bacon into numbers and giving him a casual hand job to celebrate his 50th birthday. His teenage son has cerebral palsy, and their accidental daughter, tacking on more financial burden to their already strained family, is due in a few months. But none of these factors provide a greater insight into the inherent misery of Walter White than what truly eats at him more than anything else: his resentment. White, as it turns out, was one of the most genius chemists of the last decade. Every morning, as he pathetically pedals on a portable treadmill, he stares at certificates of achievement in his past life. White, too insecure about his then business partner and ex-girlfriend's wealth, sold his share of the company for a measly $5,000. His ex married their other business partner and, largely because of White's foolish trade, are now worth billions. In one of the show's most cringeworthy scenes of juxtaposition, he is almost forced to watch as his former friend opens birthday presents in front of him. He gets arranged bacon and a hand job, and his friend gets to act like a kid on Christmas, with people lining up to tell him how great he is. Walter White hates this. He stews over it. He hates that his students, being high school students, don't care about chemistry, the only thing he's been passionate about in his entire life. He hates that to make ends meet, he has to work at a car wash scrubbing those same students' hubcaps, most of them bought with daddy's money. He hates his life, every second of it. Moreover, he hates himself, because he knows that it could be so much different. The next day, he collapses at the car wash and is taken to the hospital. He zones out as the doctor gives him the worst diagnosis he could: inoperable stage 4 lung cancer, most likely attributable to the fumes inhaled at the company he built off of his labor, but yet cannot reap any of the rewards. When he arrives back at the car wash in a haze, White finally stands up for himself, lashing out at his tyrannical boss. After leaving, he goes back to his paltry house, sits on his couch, and begins to wait to die. However, after this, White experiences a glimmer of hope. His brother-in-law and de facto best friend, Hank Schrader, a star DEA agent, takes him on a raid for a highly addictive and fast-growing new street drug, crystal meth. White, astounded at the amount of money these criminals make, can't believe his eyes. His mind gets blown a second time when he not only spots but recognizes one of the dealers, Jesse Pinkman, a former subpar student of his, fleeing the scene. White tracks down and blackmails Pinkman into partnering with him to do the unthinkable: cook crystal meth. Pinkman, a degenerate and low-status criminal, knows the business. White, a genius yet gooberish civilian, knows the chemistry. White does this, in theory, for two reasons. The first is practical. He only has, at max, 2 years to live, and estimates that he needs $737,000 to ensure his family can survive after his death. But that reason is cope, an excuse, fraudulent. The real reason that White decides to cook crystal meth, the real reason why he decides to flip his entire life completely on its head and get into a dangerous and evolving drug game, is something he does not admit until minutes left in Breaking Bad's final episode: himself. Walter White doesn't care about his wife, or his children, or his legacy to them. He only cares about righting his perception of the wrongdoing that was done to him, of showing the world that he is worth something, that he can build something everlasting, iconic, immortal. The moment that decision is made, Gilligan's desired transformation from Mr. Chips into Scarface begins, and fast. Walter White, the most unassuming drug dealer you can imagine, quickly becomes a bloodthirsty and ruthless gang lord. He shaves his head and grows a goatee, adopting the moniker of Heisenberg after his chemist hero. His product becomes the best on the market almost immediately. He begins lying to his wife, laundering money, and murdering people in droves. Escaping death by the skin of his teeth time and time again, White's underground status soon begins to reflect everything he's ever desired. The crazy thing about the evolution of Walter White from bumbling suburban dad and school teacher into said ruthless drug lord was not anything to do with the show itself. Rather, like all other anti-heroes of the era, it was the reaction of the fans. They cheered when Walter White ran over someone with his car, or allowed Jesse's girlfriend to overdose on drugs, or felt no remorse when he caused a plane crash that killed dozens. It's all part of the dopamine kick of White's now completely unhinged lust for control, power, recognition, and validation. But as John Rambo said, you can only push people so far before you get backlash, before they show you who you really are. Most of the audience, myself included, thought of White as a tragic hero, a good man who simply did bad things. The two guys he ran down with the Aztec deserved it. Jesse's girlfriend was going to get him to relapse. He didn't crash the planes. It was simply a mentally weak air traffic controller who did so. He should have done what White did, and manned up. These were the excuses we made for Walter White for 4 seasons, forgiving his every move as long as his narcissism was validated. However, executed brilliantly by Cranston and Gilligan, this all flipped in an instant. In the finale of season 4, in ironically White's biggest moment of triumph, he declares that he has won. After White has dispatched all of his enemies, evading the most harrowing claim on his life, covered his tracks from his brother-in-law, who is now obsessed with finding quote-unquote Heisenberg, and made peace with Jesse, he now reigns as the biggest meth kingpin not only in the region, but potentially the world. Yet the audience knows something the rest of the characters don't. Jesse, who had a wedge driven between him and White through menacing meth kingpin Gus Fring, had nearly killed White in the episode before. Plotting a plan to poison Fring with a tainted cigarette, Pinkman had horrifically discovered that his girlfriend's son had ingested the same poison after discovering the cigarette was missing. Pinkman, knowing White's true nature, hunted him down, accusing him of poisoning the child out of spite. White, pleading for his life, swears that he didn't. Jesse, after nearly putting a bullet through his partner's head, relents, conceding to the fact that it most likely was Fring's idea. Before Pinkman and White part ways in the finale, Jesse reveals to White that the child is fine, and that he ingested a tasty-looking berry called lily of the valley, which had a similar chemical composition to ricin, the poison they were going to use on Fring. White, simply relieved, and seemingly relieved, rather, rejoices with Jesse before departing. Yet horrifyingly, the last shot of the season is not White riding off into the sunset a victor. Instead, it is a shot of a potted plant in the easily known White backyard, one with the label conveniently still attached. Lily of the Valley. This was the final straw for so many people, and for me. Americans are a graceful and forgiving people. We love a comeback story, a second chance, and an underdog. Walter White was all of those things. So then why was this the line in the sand, the thing that told us that Walter White was now a bad person? There are certain moral lines that you cannot afford to cross. There are certain things that, when they are done by someone to someone, there is no going back, no opportunity for redemption, no mercy. One of those things is deliberately harming a child. We all know that at the most fundamental level, children are the most precious resource a society has. Anything that harms a child is, by definition, harmful to the broader culture. Children are our birthright, our destiny, our future, our most tangible value add to the whole of a culture. Anything that harms them harms us. Everything around us should be as highly optimized as possible for them to flourish, so that when it comes time for them to adopt the responsibility of inheriting a culture, they can do so to the best of their ability. When Walter White poisoned a child, that was the final straw. This is no longer a man, quote-unquote, doing it for his family. This is no longer a man who had been wronged and was finally expressing his opportunity to get what he deserved. This is a bad man, an evil man, a reprehensible man, one so self-absorbed that he was willing to play the role of the Pied Piper for a child's near demise in order to ascend to the top of the twisted status hierarchy of the drug trade. It's sick, and it's wrong. Walter White, both in the show and in fan perception of the show, never recovered. But yet, strangely, those same people have all fallen silent for not just one poisoning of a child, but of the mass poisoning of all of our children. It wasn't just happening to a poor fictional boy in the best television series of our era. It's happening right now. And to the should-be horror of all of us, our elites, the ones who have anointed into positions of power to guide our society, and the birthright of our children, have not only allowed, but encouraged it to happen. 2 years ago this week, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced that he was running for president on one of Tucker Carlson's last Fox News broadcasts. The news sent waves throughout the entire political landscape. The Republican primary debates were shaping out to be a massive waste of donor money, a nothing burger, because of the grim reaper of Donald Trump. Slowly but surely, they were all dropping like flies, conceding their inadequacy to the desires of the Trump base. But what was even more shocking was that Bobby Kennedy dared to cross the even more intense Rubicon of the Democratic Party, a party that, for the longest time, had been defined by his family, including his own father, one of the great Americans of the past 100 years. Joe Biden was still being propped up as a valuable and viable candidate on the ticket. He was as sharp as a tack, all of his allies stated. He was as sharp as a tack. All of his allies lied. When everyone immediately thought when Bobby Kennedy declared was the same as what would happen on the Republican ticket. What's the point? The Republicans that are running may have some good ideas, but they're not Donald Trump. For some, including myself, the same thought occurred on the Democrat side. Bobby Kennedy may have some good ideas, but he's not Joe Biden. However, as soon as Bobby Kennedy blacklisted from all mainstream outlets due to libelous claims of conspiracy theories and crackpot accusations, the scales immediately melted from people's eyes. Everything that people had thought was true turned out to not be so. The Democrat Party was not the party of Bobby Kennedy Sr., or John F. Kennedy, or even Bill Clinton. Instead, it had changed into something much more radical and much more sinister. Bobby Kennedy ran on three primary causes: ending the corporate capture of government agencies, ending the chronic disease epidemic, and ending the Ukraine war. The Democrats, he stated, were the party of freedom, of peace, of sovereignty. They were the ones who advocated for the civil rights of children and ethnic minorities. They had an inherent distrust of corporations, the intelligence community, and our security state. They protested wars, not cheered them. Quote, "I'm a Kennedy Democrat," was one of his most powerful slogans in the campaign. But this was a lie. It took all of a couple months for Bobby Kennedy to discover that his family's party didn't exist anymore. It was completely captured by corporations, government agencies, the intelligence community, and the security state. It was addicted to foreign wars, as evidenced by Joe Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan and saber-rattling in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. But the place where this was most evident and most appalling was exactly the place where Bobby Kennedy cared the most, and what he had dedicated his life to for his entire existence: public health, particularly of children. RFKJ, an environmental lawyer by trade, has spent his entire life suing companies like Monsanto, cleaning up the Hudson River, and banning things like pesticides. His running mate, Nicole Shanahan, had joined his campaign specifically due to the fact that she believed her daughter, who was diagnosed with autism, was affected by chronic disease. Ever since the era that his father and uncle had left the political arena, all of our elites, both Democrats and Republicans, have turned a blind eye to the chronic disease epidemic. Obesity rates for children have exploded. Cancer rates in young adults are alarmingly high. Both young men and young women show dangerous levels of infertility and sterility. Mental health disorders have ravaged their minds. The food pyramid and standard American diet were filled with ultra-processed foods, seed oils, and other dyes and toxins that were banned in nearly every other country but ours on Earth. Bobby Kennedy should have been dubbed a hero for drawing attention to this. As mentioned, there is nothing more precious to a society than the health and prosperity and promise of its children. If they fail, a society fails. Period. Bobby Kennedy and his Make America Healthy Again movement, bolstered by titanic figures such as Casey and Callie Means, Jillian Michaels, and Senator Ron Johnson, was the most effective and popular grassroots movement since Donald Trump's Make America Great Again movement took center stage a decade before this. But instead, the posture our elites took towards him was the complete opposite: total and complete villainization. Bobby Kennedy's a crackpot, they said. He's insane, a kook, a nut job. But why? Because he said the consistent diet and exercise regimens most likely do better than Ozempic or vaccination? Because he doesn't care for our government agencies being a bit too cozy with the corporations they're tasked with regulating, and all of them seem to be manned by people we didn't elect and seemingly can't get rid of? That our children are collectively stalling out in midair? The answer to all of those questions is yes. When Bobby Kennedy endorsed Donald Trump on August 23rd of last year, it was the most seismic combination of populist movements in recent American history. The unlikely yet supremely powerful alliance between MAGA and MAHA was, in my estimation, the biggest nail in the coffin for Donald Trump winning the 2024 election. Bobby Kennedy provided cover for Trump because Trump knew MAHA's influence. The posture of our elites towards the MAHA movement tells us something that goes beyond health. In Kennedy's 10th Senate confirmation hearing to become Secretary of Health and Human Services, which Trump had promised in return for his endorsement, everything he had talked about for decades was on full display. Bernie Sanders, who made a living as a walking hypocrite surrounding big government and big business corruption, accosted him about onesies. Kennedy laughed out loud when Elizabeth Warren, who vacuumed up millions from pharma companies to fund her career, reprimanded him about him not joining the boards of pharma companies after he left his post at HHS. Every single Democrat senator, the people that claim to care about the marginalized and oppressed, voted against his confirmation to do something different to save our children from the treadmill of chronic disease. Our elites on both sides of the political spectrum want our children to be sick in every way possible. As Callie Means has repeatedly and rightly stated over and over again, there is nothing more profitable to them than a sick child. Just as Walter White noticed, they're standing in the way of their dominance, their control, their power. Why not make them more sick? Why not milk that cow, squeeze that orange, and wring out that towel as much as you possibly can? And the people that do this, and there are a lot of them, by the way, are deranged, fanatical, and sick in their own right. They have damaged Americans, particularly young Americans, at the most foundational level in pursuit of profit and power. To analyze why they hate Bobby Kennedy and the MAHA movement to the degree that they do, you need to analyze who they truly hate more. Anything that gets in their way, including the sacrifice of our children. A dark reality indeed, but the reality nonetheless. Now let's get to some other stories. Okay, so Elon Musk is in hot water, and that's nothing new to Elon Musk, but there are rumors of tension, quote unquote, inside the White House with Elon Musk. If you guys have been living under a rock, which many of you probably fortunately in this case have, Elon Musk has gotten super close to Donald Trump over the last, I would say 9 months, really I'm recording this in April, 10 months, ever since Trump got shot. That was when Musk endorsed Donald Trump, and he's been kind of moving this way, and I can get into maybe reasons as to why he's gotten so close to Trump and why he's like the MAGA poster child now or whatever. But so this has gotten to a point where Elon Musk, I would probably safely say, is Donald Trump's closest outside advisor at this point, which is very interesting because Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He's the most influential man outside of politics in the world because he's worth $400 billion and he's reshaping the way we do rockets and space travel and AI and Neuralink and all these other type of things. So many people feel that Elon Musk, I think this is kind of the central tension here. Many people feel that Musk was simply just set to work inside of the government. But as I said, it turns out that he is, to some, Trump's closest advisor. And so I want to make something abundantly clear. I'm kind of Musk neutral. I've said that for the longest time. I'm really not like an Elon Musk fanboy. I'm really not like so anti-Elon Musk either. I'm kind of, I think, riding a pretty healthy middle ground. And I think the guy is really smart. I think the guy has a lot to offer the world, obviously, and the country. I think Doge is a relatively good thing, and most good thing if it's going to be used right, which I think it is. But I think this is a double-edged sword, and I think as value-driven people, as conservatives, which is mostly my audience, I would assume, because conservatives are the more value-driven party by far, and it's not close. This is a double-edged sword, and I think we should talk about both of these things because I do think that Musk is flying a little bit too close to the sun, and Trump and the MAGA people are flying a little bit too close to the sun here. And I'm a MAGA person, but I like to think I'm more objective and can zoom out to kind of say, hey, we're kind of need to be called on this. So again, double-edged sword here. The first one, on one hand, we should welcome this, like I said earlier, because, and again, this is why I don't really understand the leftist freak out about all this. Well, I do, because they're going after USAID and other shell companies of like the intelligence community, which I just said in my monologue about MAHA. They hate that we're going after the intelligence community because that's the one thing that really keeps them in power institutionally inside of our government, inside of the deep state, but that's neither here nor there. Because we should want smart people working inside our government to solve our biggest problems. We should want that. We should want as many smart people involved as possible. I'm not that big of a fan of David Sachs, but I'm really glad that David Sachs is advising us on crypto and AI because David Sachs, I think, knows a lot about crypto and AI, certainly more than I do, and certainly more than the people in our government do. So I want someone like that to be an advisor to Donald Trump. I want Elon Musk, who is a very smart computer programmer, he's an engineer, to run the data mining organization, which is Doge. That's what Doge is. It's a data mining operation inside of the government to identify waste, fraud, and abuse and eliminate it. I think we should want that. And it's interesting because when Trump announced Doge, he said that this was the Manhattan Project of our time. And I think that's actually accurate in this comparison, because think about when we worked on the Manhattan Project. We had Niels Bohr, who was a foreigner, advised, or who was outside of the government, advised on this. We had J. Robert Oppenheimer. We had, I'm trying to think who the German guy was. We had Albert Einstein advised us and helped us on this. And the goal was, we want to get all the smart people in the room, because we need to build the atomic bomb before the Germans do and before anyone does. And I didn't like our use of the atomic bomb. I think the atomic bomb was a evil thing, and I think it's still an evil thing. And I hate that we have nukes in our world right now, but we do. And I think that the point of this, all of this is, we want smart people advising our government. And Elon Musk, and this is a big claim to make, but I don't really think there's much argument to this point. He's maybe the smartest person who has ever lived that we have on record. So the fact that he's taking time to just help us and do this out of his own volition is a really good thing. I thought actually, and what was also funny about this was that, I think myself included, I think a lot of people thought that like the Doge people were these 19-year-old kids like Scott Galloway, who I like and hate at the same time. He's an interesting figure, but I genuinely think Scott is a positive force for our society, but he hates Trump. He hates Musk. He doesn't like any of them. He was kind of crying with Kara Swisher on one of his podcasts, and he was saying like, oh, these are just a bunch of 19-year-old kids in tie-dye shirts smoking weed and whatever. And I kind of thought the same thing, but these are actually like men who are balding and people who are in like powerful, positions inside of banks and IT organizations. And I'm like, whoa, that's pretty impressive. So this is the fact that he's taking time to organize Doge and to act upon Doge and to make sure that he wants to cut, I think, $2 trillion, I think, is either at least $1 trillion, but hopefully $2 trillion in spending. He thinks that he can get at least $1 trillion out of Medicare and Medicaid, which would be, in my opinion, awesome. I think we need to do that. We need to be able to touch that sacred cow, in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. So I'm glad that Elon Musk is helping out Donald Trump. I'm glad that he's helping out the United States of America. He's a patriotic person, it seems. And so I'm glad that he's doing this. And I'm glad that Doge is a thing. And I'm glad that we can help see that everything is working out in our favor for this to be a good thing. But also, the more important thing, and what I want to, this is probably going to get, some pushback here, but the most important thing is that the perception of the rich and powerful people that are seemingly more and more in control of our government is unnerving. It's unnerving. It's true with lobbying, and it's true with people like George Soros, and it's true with people who I think that, there's a reason why the right has every right to call, pun intended, to call out George Soros. Because George Soros is interfering in American politics. He's buying off attorney generals in cities. He's buying off politicians. He's doing all the things he's doing in order to filter his influence through the Open Society Foundation, which is a corrupt, evil, demonic organization that wants to, basically usher in the New World Order, essentially. I don't think that's good, and I think the right has every right, again, pun intended, to go after George Soros. I think they have every right to. And also, I think that the person that ironically reminds me the most of Elon Musk is Anthony Fauci. So think about how Fauci came to power, right? Fauci is an unelected bureaucrat. Musk is the same thing. He now works in conjunction with, he does not work for the U.S. government. He works, I believe, in partnership with the U.S. government. It's an independent agency, kind of like the Federal Reserve, but he still works in conjunction with the federal government. No one elected Elon Musk. He was kind of anointed by Donald Trump. And then when him and Vivek split up, he was kind of got control of Doge. And now the right is kind of like making him their poster child. Like the Fauci thing was so ridiculous was because people were saying that he should become a saint in the Catholic Church. I believe Fauci is Catholic, but he should become a saint. They had him on candles. They had he said, I am the science. I'm doing all these things. And now you got Elon Musk kind of putting on the Trump pom-poms and the MAGA pom-poms and everything like that. And he's going out and he's got chainsaws on stage, and he's making jokes with Javier Milei, who I love, by the way, but he's like making jokes with Milei. He's doing this. He's kind of again shitting on people on Twitter, which I think is funny, to be honest. But he's getting into a uncomfy position because when you look at the alliance between Musk and Trump are the two most influential people, I would argue, in the world. And it's not a good look for an unelected bureaucrat to seemingly be running our federal government. Because Doge really, at the end of the day, like I said, Doge is a data mining operation. So essentially, we're gathering all of this segmented and siloed data inside of the United States federal government, which I have no doubt when Musk says a lot of it's old, a lot of it's terribly outdated. It's kind of running on like Windows 7, like back in the day. So it's awful. And so Doge is not a sexy thing at all. It's an auditing organization that's using a data mining funnel to suck up all the old data, examine the data, run it through AI, and then eliminate different departments or different projects or different things and whatever. And that's how they're able to spot all of this, because there's no way, the government's too big. And if you're going to go through that much of the government's federal data manually, it would take years. But what Musk is doing, since he has XAI and he knows how to, and he was a founding member of OpenAI and all these other things, he knows how the models work. So he's funneling the data that Doge is getting through this model that they're using for it and identifying this thing and saying, that's gone, this is gone, whatever. And so when looking at that, like and obviously the USAID thing was a big deal, and there were a couple other things that were a big deal, but in actuality, this should be a very boring thing. It should not be taking up headlines. It should not be the dominant strain of Trump's second presidency. That should be something that is far more important. And Doge is important, but important on face value. Like the fact that we're talking about government waste and like $10 million here, which is nothing to the federal government. $10 million here, $10 million here. And also, like I heard that, now we're going to up the Pentagon's budget, which is wildly over budgeted, to $1 trillion, because apparently we need more money to fight less wars, unless we're going to go to war with Iran, which I think Trump wants to do very, very badly. So we're going to go to another war in the Middle East is my prediction. I have no inside baseball on that, but that's what my prediction is. And so, like, is Doge working? Like, this does not seem to, like, it's very incongruent with what a lot of people are saying. And so I think my solution to this, if I were advising the president, if I were advising the government, which I thank God I'm not, to be honest, for the good of the Trump presidency, I'm a big fan of Donald Trump. I always have been. For the good of the Trump presidency, I think Trump needs to break up with Elon Musk. I think there have been reports, Caroline Leavitt, to the press secretary, she was talking about how this is, false. This isn't happening. This isn't a thing. I think it needs to be a thing. I think it needs to be a thing. I think Trump and Musk need to go their separate ways. I think he needs some distance from one another. He needs to be the girlfriend or the boyfriend. Oh, the boyfriend, we don't do the swap gender stuff here. He needs to be the boyfriend that tells, I guess, the other boyfriend, we need some space. We need to go on a break. We need some distance. Again, I think Doge is valuable, but not at the expense of the broader Trump agenda, which is aiming to reset everything about how we do everything. That's how transformational he is. Bill O'Reilly was talking about this the other day. He is the biggest disruptor now, especially with the tariff thing that's going on. Trump is the biggest disruptor of a president we've had since Theodore Roosevelt. Because when Theodore Roosevelt was taking on the robber barons, he was taking on the banks, he was taking on Standard Oil and U.S. Steel and all these people and going out and smashing up these monopolies and being a quote-unquote anti-capitalist because he wanted to take on monopolies, and monopolies are the most anti-capitalistic thing you can ever have inside of an economy. So the people that say that are stupid, in my opinion. But anyway, that's what he was doing. And so he was doing all those things and saying this and slashing that and blah, 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 blah. And so I think that it's too important for us to get bogged down into Doge and this Musk-Trump thing. We have more important things to accomplish. Like, I think this tariff thing, we're not going to talk about tariffs today. I don't really care that much, to be honest. I mean, it's just like, it's an economic measure. I know people are kind of using it as like a buzzword to say like they either like what Trump is doing or not like what Trump is doing, which is fine. But I think what he's doing with this tariff thing is going to reset the world economy. And I think it's resetting the world economy right now. That's why the markets have taken such a nosedive. I think it's going to be a good thing in the long term. I'm a pro-tariff person. I'm a pro-worker person, which is why I'm pro-tariff. And so I think that it's just, we have more important, we have two wars going on that we need to end. We have the economy. We have the border, which is basically solved within 2 seconds. And so I think that this kind of wedge that the media and the press and the left and all these folks are trying to drive in between Trump and Musk, they're not helping matters by that. And I think that this is kind of just how this elitism is getting more and more mainstreamed. And I think regardless of what you think about Elon Musk, and again, I'm probably more pro-Elon Musk than I am anti-Elon Musk. I'm really pro-Trump, and I'm pro what he's doing, and I'm pro the Trump and the MAGA agenda. But I think what's happening here is that this is just another branch of the elites in our society on the right and the left becoming mainstreamed. And I want to, and this is kind of the theme of this whole entire episode, is going to be how these elites are losing power, because they are losing power. And I think the key to understanding elitism, cultural elitism inside of our country, is through the lens of what my friend Rob Henderson calls luxury beliefs. I don't know if Rob is my friend, but I think I've met Rob a couple times. I think Rob and I are friendly, and I love Rob's work. I think Rob is one of the most influential thought leaders inside of the entire world. So for those who do not know what a luxury belief is, this is going to blow your brain and melt your brain. So luxury beliefs, the definition for luxury beliefs, and we'll get into who Rob is in a second, but the definition for luxury beliefs is ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class while inflicting costs on the lower class. Now, like I said, this is probably the best definition of elitism I have ever heard, the best explanation of the elitism that we've seen in our culture that I have ever heard. And no one's really put it in such simple terms until Rob did. Like when I heard this for the first time, it completely revolutionized the way I thought about stuff. And I said, oh my gosh, that's so right. So again, I'm going to read the definition one more time. Luxury beliefs are ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class while inflicting costs on the lower class. And again, this explains virtually everything about the way that our world is moving. When you funnel all of these bad ideas through the lens and the definition of luxury beliefs, it explains everything. Now, again, this is created by Rob Henderson. He's a PhD, if that matters. And Rob worked hard for his PhD, so I want to say that it does matter. He wrote a great book on it called Troubled, which it was one of my favorite books I read all of last year. It's on my Substack, and it's also on my podcast for those who are interested in listening. Troubled by Rob Henderson it's a phenomenal book. I believe Rob is one of the smartest up-and-coming thought leaders in the world. He teaches a bunch of courses on Peterson Academy. Jordan is kind of one of his mentors, and he really has helped Rob get platformed in a lot of different ways. He's been on his podcast twice. He's been on Chris Williamson's show a bunch of times. Him and Chris are really good friends. And so when you look at all of the troubles that have been caused by this, so let's look at the practical implications of luxury beliefs. And I'm just going to name a few right off the top of my head that have been caused by luxury beliefs, because luxury beliefs, I think, are like I said, they're the explanation for most everything that has gone wrong inside of our culture. So when it comes to just the chaos that this luxury belief, elitist, expert class, ruling class kind of ideology, they're all over the place if you look at them. The biggest one, I think the most explanational, that's not a word, the most, I would say, easily identifiable, let's put it that way, the most easily identifiable luxury belief that has ever existed in the history of the human race is defund the police. Defund the police. So, and I'm not saying that because I'm on the right, which I am, but when you look at the logic of defund the police is the most pertinent and the most definitionally sound luxury belief ever. Remember our definition: ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class but inflict costs on the lower class. Who was saying that we should defund the police? Mostly white, suburban to upper class people in service jobs. Politician, lawyer, business executive, everything else. Defund the police, that was everybody that was in a more suburban style, urban style neighborhood. They probably had a security system on their house. They probably had cameras, locks on their doors. Everyone has locks on their doors, but advanced security systems. Many of them could pay for private security by themselves, by the way. They lived in a nicer area, so the thought of theft or carjacking or violent crime was not a big thought in their head. And who did not have all those things? Poor people. Poor people did not have those things. And who needs the police to step in more than the upper class? Poor people need that. Poor people are overwhelmingly more suspect to carjackings, to assault, to murder, to rape, to theft, to everything that happens inside of an area where there is a lot of rampant crime. And so when you look at all of this opinion was so dangerous. Think about the damage this caused, by the way, after the 2020 madness where we had cities burning down and stuff. Defunding the police. My home city that I live in right now, Austin, defunded, I think, the police by like a third of their budget, and crime in Austin spiked. We had a crime wave from about 2020 up until 2023, I think. It kind of slowed down a little bit this year. It might be picking up, I don't know. But it was everywhere. I mean, it was the most violent, criminally rife time in recent American history. They basically, like in San Francisco, I believe you can steal things from like a CVS. If they're less than $750 in value, you can just walk in and steal stuff out of a CVS, out of a medicine cabinet, and just walk out, and they can't prosecute you. Like, think about that. And the people that are running a CVS, or they're running a Walgreens, they're running a Target, like, these people are not wealthy. I mean, they're doing probably fine, but they're probably middle class. Like if you operate like a franchise of like a McDonald's or a CVS pharmacy or something like that, you need licenses, yes. You need probably a little bit of sense of business, yes. But you're operating a general store. And if people can just come in and pillage your shelves and not really have anything to answer for them, no police to stop them, no anything else, it's a catastrophe. It's awful. So defunding the police is, I think, the most definitionally sound luxury belief ever. Another one that I think is really, really interesting to look at is when people say, oh, marriage is an outdated institution. Again, the question we should ask after someone says something like that luxury belief that is so stupid and so elitist and so harmful to so many people is, okay, what happens if we get rid of marriage? What happens if we get rid of marriage? So, for example, single parenthood goes up, wealth goes down among families because families are broken, lawyer costs, children stop flourishing to the best of their ability. People don't find happiness and fulfillment inside of a romantic relationship. That's a horrible thing that happens. And again, who says these things and who gets the cost downstream of these things? These are people my age, the young 20, 30 somethings who are into polygamy and like, I'm not going to commit to anybody. And, I'm strong, independent woman. I don't need to support a family. I'm just going to be a top G, whatever. And it's these people, it's people like me. And I don't say this, but people around me say these things that, who needs marriage? Marriage kind of sucks. Marriage is a bad deal for men. It sucks for women. It's this, whatever. And so when people try to apply that in the lower class of society, in the working and poor and impoverished classes, you see the marriage rates there are abysmal compared to wealthier people. The same thing, children are a burden to my flourishing. Religion sucks. When you take children out of a society, and this is happening right now, I'm reading a great book by Tim Carney called Family Unfriendly about the just destruction of the American family and the birth rates and all these other things, and that's my pet obsession for a long time. When we say children are a burden and I can't afford children or I can't, whatever to kids, our society suffers tremendously. When you take God out of a society, when you take religious structure out of a society, the divide, it's the debasement from morality, because this is the rule of law issue. All laws and enforcement of morality. Anyone who says otherwise is not, they're just wrong, to be frank. When you look at all of these things, again, these are elite opinions, predominantly by wealthy, well-off, progressive, young to middle-aged people that are saying these things. And when you look at all of these issues, when you look at the marriage issue, the defund the police issue, the children issue, the religion issue, and you could walk down the line with all of these things. The dividing line has nothing to do with anything that the woke crowd, which is primarily the people who say this, the woke people, say that it does. But it has everything to do with a much peskier and much harder problem to solve, which is class. Class is the dividing line in America. It's not race, it's not gender, it's not sexual orientation, it's not political orientation. It's not any of those things. The number one factor that is dividing people in our society is class. And that's not just necessarily economic class, even though that's a part of it. It is kind of the establishmentarian ruling class against kind of the overall population, regardless of political orientation. We talked about this with Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump and why that, fusion was so seismic. So, and when you look at, again, the issues that I just said, marriage, children, religion, police, public services, etc., they all overwhelmingly harm the poor. The rich do not really get affected by any of these things. And honestly, the rich are all married, mostly. They mostly all have children. They mostly all practice some sorts of religion. I'm not talking the crazy celebrity people. They mostly all are in well-guarded, safe communities, and they all probably use some form of public services, like the fire department and the water department and all these type of things. But we don't hear anything about this at all in our discourse. And again, this has led to this development of thought leaders and experts inside of our ruling class developing a superiority complex about their actual importance, which these people are largely not important at all when you think about it like this, especially when they're saying stupid ideas like this. And unfortunately, because of that, these ideas have exploded inside of our mainstream discourse, which is how we have gotten, again, nearly every bad idea ever inside of our modern era. And this is kind of again, I think everything at a certain extent can be disseminated down to luxury beliefs, what they are, and who says them. Because, again, the defining line in America, I'm not a Marxist. I'm not saying this trust me, I'm not. But I'm a very pro-worker. I'm a pro-working poor class, getting people out of poverty. I really advocate for those people. I know a lot of those people back at home. My family was those people. I'm not like, and I guess I am an elite. So I guess maybe this is a bit, whatever for me to say, because I, make good money and I have a company and I do business online and I work in the service industry and whatever, which is fine. And I own that, but I really care about these people. I really do. And they're lovely people. They're wonderful people. And the big reason I moved out of the city was to do this. I do not live in Austin, Texas. I live in a suburb, in a working middle class community where they're like kids and families and people that aren't, balling in a Lamborghini type things I see all the time downtown Austin. I wanted to get away from that, and I wanted to get closer to everyday regular people. And I love everyday regular people because they are the most interesting people. They're the most fun people. They're the most grounded people. They're the most religious people, to be frank, which it just shows how ridiculous these luxury beliefs ideas are. And so then the question really becomes, how do we beat these ideas? How do we beat luxury beliefs? And I think that that's a really notable thing to try to do. So the only way to beat bad ideas is the good ideas. We've heard that concept over and over again. And I think that's right. I'm not saying that the idea is wrong. I don't think it is wrong. But the interesting thing about this is it's a very interesting concept to delve into, because really when you look at the complexity, quote unquote, of all the luxury beliefs that are out there, whether it's defund the police or marriage sucks or men suck or women suck, like whatever it's going to be. The answer to all of them is simple. Just don't comply. Say no. Don't do them. Say, go screw off. That's all you got to say. The answer to luxury beliefs is to simply not participate in the game, which you can do, by the way. I know it's a lot of cultural reinforcement around it, but the best thing you can do inside of your company, inside of your town, inside of your city, inside of your politics, inside of everything you can do, if something does not smell right, if something smells like a luxury belief to you that conveys elitism, which is all stalling out in midair, thankfully, for the most part, just don't comply. Like, say that's ridiculous. Say that that's stupid. Say no. Do not do that. These people cannot make you do anything. Our elites, quote unquote, cannot make you do anything. Our ruling class, quote unquote, cannot make you do anything. So the answer to luxury beliefs and this kind of faux pas and fraudulent elitism that we're seeing now is bravery and it's courage, because bravery and courage are the solution to almost all moral issues, of which luxury beliefs are the most pernicious. They are the most pernicious anti-morality issues of our day and age, easily, by a long mile. So when anyone tries to overreach and or invade your life in any way that is remotely totalitarian, you have a moral obligation to say no and tell them to shove it. And you should tell them to shove it, because what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do? And we saw this so often inside of our world in the last several years. We once had vaccine cards, and I'm not all anti-vax. I don't think. I don't know. I think about a lot of vaccines, but we had a show me your papers moment inside of our society. Like the Nazis did that. Like, that's kind of crazy. And I'm not saying that all people in government are Nazis, but I'm saying that's kind of that's kind of a weird thing to do. So whenever you get something that is off base from your values, you have no obligation, you have no right, you have no reason to participate in that thing. And this is going to probably be I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this, because a lot of people are saying I need to do this to keep my job. I need to do this to do this. I need to do this to make my wife happy. It's like, well, sure, to keep your job, to make your wife happy, to do whatever, but at the expense of what? At the expense of what? If it's at the expense of your values, you have no obligation to do the thing that people are saying that you're doing, whether it's, again, like all these stupid, get the vax, eat the bugs, get the chip in the brain, shut up. Like all these things are just wild, bananas, ridiculous things. And so you can never, this is maybe some encouragement to you, never let anybody prevent you from speaking the truth and embodying your values. Never let that happen. Ever, 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 ever let that happen. And I want to explain the benefit of this, because bravery, I was actually watching this, I don't know if this is John Delaney, who I don't really know much about at all, but I was watching a Dave Ramsey clip, and Dave Ramsey, I think, he was getting interviewed by Ken Coleman, who I also don't know, but I heard a lot of people like Ken Coleman. So if you like Ken Coleman, comment down below. But I was watching Dave Ramsey talk to Ken Coleman, and I think Ken said, and I have no data right in front of me for this, but this kind of just coming to me in the time. But Ken Coleman said to Dave Ramsey, apparently above 60% of Americans want to be self-employed, but yet I believe it's like the number's like 9% actually are self-employed. And he asked him what the gap was, because I mean, that's a huge percent. That's 50% of America. If we're taking the 60% number as accurate and the 9% is accurate from people who want to be self-employed versus are who getting self-employed, that means, I mean, what is that? Like, 82% of the people that want to versus the people that are actually do the thing that they want to do. And Dave Ramsey said the right answer. And I know it's the right answer because I've done this. And the right answer as to why the vast majority of people who want to be self-employed are not self-employed is because of fear. It's because of fear, which, again, going back to the courage and the bravery point, it is the same thing. Courage and bravery are the delineating factors into who acts out their morality, who acts out their set of values versus who doesn't. That is the neat and skinny of it. That is the facts of the problem. So I want to maybe say some, like, let's just chart two paths here. So I want to articulate what happens from my experience when you act upon your bravery versus when you act on your cowardice, because I've done both a lot of times. And I've probably been more of a coward than I have been brave. Actually, I know that I have, because I've abandoned a lot of things that I haven't done. But what I've noticed, I actually just noticed this last weekend, I in my personal life, not necessarily in my business, but in my business certainly, in my career certainly, but in my personal life too. I want to talk about what happens and what has happened to me when I have chosen bravery and being a brave person versus being a coward and succumbing to cowardice and being a cowardly person. So what happens almost ubiquitously, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. I've been curious about the the psychology of brave people and the people who go out and take risks and do whatever. Like, we've talked about a lot about them in the show, and they're the people that, not coincidentally change the world. And so I've been like, what is that? So I've really looked into that quite a bit. And what happens if you become brave and if you decide to be braver and more courageous in every area of your life is that you'll get stronger. Because I believe the biggest precursor to strength is bravery. It is hard to step inside of a gym when you have not been in the gym for 5 years or ever. Like, I think one of the, so I go to a great boxing gym here called Archetype Boxing Club. I'm actually, my Tumblr, shout out to Archetype Boxing Club. They were really my first community that I really spent with in Austin, Texas. I've been over there for 3.5 years and I still love it. I was there this morning, actually. And so what was really mind-blowing about my boxing gym when I learned about it and learned more about kind of the people that go there, because I work out with mostly wonderful people. Like, I love the people that go there. And I was talking to one of my coaches once, and he told me something that really blew my mind. He's like, Sam, a lot of the people that come in here have never been to a gym in their entire life. And I said, what? And I said, like, there's no way. There's no way. And he's like, yeah, a lot of people have never been in a gym. And I'm like, so they come in a gym where they get punches thrown at them, and that's the first experience in a gym? And he said, yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's bravery. Bravery is taking a step into a gym when you have never been in a gym, when you have never consistently worked out in your entire life. And by the way, all of those folks, all of those people that have done that, wildly successful in terms of the improvements inside of their fitness. It's amazing to see. It's amazing. People who have lost 40 pounds in the span of 2 months, who have improved their lifespan probably by decades in terms of doing that, like just completely different people from walking in there versus maybe not walking in there if they succumb to their fear. And so you notice this across all areas. And if you become brave, you become braver in all other areas of your life. You might find yourself, if you do one thing, let's just say your fitness, because we're on that topic, you might be more compelled to ask for a raise inside of your work. You might be compelled, as I was, this is what happened to me last week, I went up to a woman in my church and I asked her out. I would have never done that a couple of years ago. I would have been terrified to do that, probably a couple of months ago, to be honest with you. But I have become braver, if I can say so, and I'm saying this out of humility because I was such a coward for the longest time. That's why my life sucked. And that's why your life probably sucks, by the way. It's a word for you. If you need to, if you're thinking like, oh, my life sucks, be braver. Your life will get better. So I was such a coward for the longest time, but then, I started becoming braver and I started, really being aggressive with what I wanted and how I wanted to run my life and conduct myself and do all those things. And it ended up helping quite a bit. And I was able to really, really make a lot of strides. And so end goal of this, and what I really want to drive home here, is when you become braver and when you take more risks, when you speak up for what you believe in, when you go for and seek what you want, you will give yourself more shots to get what you want. So again, this is not the law of attraction, the secret, all that demonic stuff that people talk about all the time. It's not that, because the law of attraction is bullshit. It's not real. Manifestation is bullshit. It's not real. But I think the law of attraction, what that actually is in practicality and in actuality and reality, it's just you being a brave person. It's you simply not being fearful anymore. And you stepping out in boldness and saying, hey, I want this. I want to go for that job. I want to go for that promotion. I want to go for that raise. I want to start that business. I want to ask that girl out. I want to do this. I want to do that. And you act upon it. Like don't just my friend Afiz Bayoku has been a good friend of mine for a very long time now. He says all the time, be serious. Don't be curious. Be serious and not curious. I say that to myself all the time. Like that phrase changed my life when I first heard it. I was like, wow. Like that's it. The line between the successful people in any area of life and the unsuccessful people is seriousness or curiousness. That is the differentiator. That is the line in the sand. And so then on the contrary, to paint more of a hell picture opposite of that heaven, because that's what we do here on the show, is what happens if you don't become braver, if you don't stand for your values, if you don't go for enforcing your values inside of your life, is that the opposite happen. And the opposite of strength, obviously, is weakness. Because cowardice is a precursor to weakness. Every weak person in their heart, in their soul, is a coward. Every single one of them is a coward. And I say that out of love. I don't say that to demean people, but I say that to be honest, because I genuinely believe that. Every weak person at their core is a coward first. If you don't put yourself out there, if you don't actively seek what you want, if you don't make yourself, if you become curious over becoming serious, you will end up living a life completely dictated by the whims of other people. Completely dictated by them. You will have no chance at all. At all. And so that's about the worst way to live that I can ever possibly imagine, at least for me, because I am independent almost to a fault. And I say that not as a compliment. I've bitten myself in the ass more times doing that than I can count. But at the end of the day, if I'm proud of myself for one thing, it's that I have lived my life completely dictated by my values ever since I started on this journey about 6 years ago now. And the opposite of that, what I know for a fact is the opposite of that, where you do not express your values at all, where you don't go for anything, where you don't have something in your back pocket that you can say, this is my dividing line and I will stand for this. You're a slave, man. You're a slave, and that's a strong word, but it's the worst way to live that I could possibly imagine. But yet most people, and if I can say, I bet a lot of you feel like you're living this way. You probably feel like you're living this way. And the thing is that you do not have to. You don't have to live that way. And I like to say all the time that you can, changing your life it's honestly not that hard. It's not that hard. It takes some hard decisions. And the decisions are probably the hardest part of all of this. Because decision making is only meant for brave people, by the way. That's a word for people out there too. So if you want to have a better life, make decisions based on your values. If you want to have a worse life, make decisions based on other people's values. That's the way that successful people do it. That is the way that successful people do it. And now, I want to end on a positive note here. I feel like I drag you guys down. Feel free to email me, sam@valueeconomicsacademy.com, and tell you if I don't. But now this is obviously a very broad and wide problem, and we need some perspective on all of this. It can be overwhelming, and I don't help matters that often, which is why we need to begin with the end, and I would argue the ultimate end in mind. So it's not lost on me that Easter is this weekend, and I believe we should talk about why that matters. I believe we should talk about why Easter matters. So this is a bold claim, I think, to make in our culture, sadly. Because I think Easter, and it was, and I, again, everything that I'm talking about in the culture, I'm mostly talking about myself. Easter is a tread upon holiday in our culture. It's kind of a secondary holiday. Like Americans, like we're Christmas people, we're 4th of July people, we're New Year's people, we're Thanksgiving people, we're Memorial Day people. We like American holidays. And we're a post-Christian country. We're not a theocracy, obviously. We're not a Christian country, certainly. But Easter is kind of like a back burner holiday. Like it's sadly enough, it's almost kind of like, President's Day or like all these other things where people are like, oh, Easter's this weekend. But the more and more that I've gotten into my faith and the more I've understood really what Easter means, especially as we get closer and closer to this, and Easter is this weekend when this episode premieres, it's mostly kind of looked at as like an unserious, kind of like a wannabe Christmas holiday. It's like, the Easter bunny, all that kind of thing. It's like, okay, but it's not Christmas. I don't get anything really except for candy, and candy kind of sucks because if I can get like a new iPhone or a new this, it's like, okay, it's like a diet Christmas, whatever. But what I want to say to all the people that are kind of feeling this way, and I felt this way for a very long time, is that Easter in actuality is the most important day of the year for those who celebrate it. And it should be the most important day of the year. And also, I'm going to go one step further. It's the most important day in world history, and we should treat it as such. Easter should be where we reorient our year round, not Christmas. And again, that's a bold claim to make, and I have reasons to back this up. The reason for this, and it shouldn't be Christmas, it shouldn't be Thanksgiving, even though I love Christmas, I love Thanksgiving, the 4th of July is my personal favorite day of the year. I love the 4th of July. But the reason for this, the reason why Easter should be the orienting thing of all Christians out there, for those who are listening, is because, and all people, I'll say all people, because whether you believe in Jesus or not, and I would strongly encourage that you believe in Jesus because I do, and it's awesome, and it's fun, and it's hard, but it's fun, and it's great. The world was permanently be changed because of the events of Easter. When you look at the domino effect of Easter on world history, you will see a lot of wild things start to happen. There were wars fought because of Easter. There were societies that crumbled because of Easter. There were new ones that rose because of Easter. People died. And more importantly, and what I want to maybe end with here, is that it gave billions of people hope. It gave billions of people hope. The reason why Easter matters is because it gives hope to the hopeless. And we were hopeless. And I want to talk to the Christians now for a second, just explicitly on the Christian side. Easter is a story of redemption. And for those who are Christians, we need to know where we were headed before Easter happened, before the events of Easter unfolded and changed the course of world history. Because we were headed for hell. All of us were headed for hell because of our sin. We were going off a cliff until God, the God that we worship, Jesus Christ, stepped out of heaven to be with us. Think of how miraculous that is. Think of how miraculous that is, that the God of the universe, the most powerful thing that has ever existed by infinitesimal miles, wanted to be with us. He didn't have to go out of heaven, but he did. Why? Because he loved us. I've struggled with that. That's probably the biggest question I've had since becoming a Christian, is why in the world would God step out of the perfect place of heaven to come down and deal with us? These stupid, feckless, selfish, sinful, narcissistic, just awful. Like, we're awful. Like, I believe human nature is fundamentally bad because of what happened in Genesis 3, because of the fall, when Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit. I believe I might concede that we're neutral, but we're definitely not good. Like the people that say, like, oh, I believe humans are fundamentally good. I'm like, that's kind of naive, and it is naive, I think. But anyway, I don't want to talk about that now. But, and not only, and this is unique among all world religions, all of them, not only did God want to be with us and come down and live as a man. Jesus Christ was a man. He lived. There's factual record of this. There's evidence of this. Not only did he want to be with us, but he sacrificed himself for us. When Jesus died on the cross, he took on death, hell, the wrath of God, and he won. And he won. I'm writing a eulogy for my friend Dylan that I talked to you guys about earlier this week. And I think the most optimistic set of phrases ever is in the Gospel of John, which is my favorite book of the Bible. I've read it so many times. It made me a Christian in a lot of ways. I have to thank my friend Taylor Higgins for putting me onto that. So shout out to Taylor. But I'm in my eulogy, I really harp on John chapter 16, verse 33. I believe I'm getting that right. where Jesus said, in this world you'll have trouble, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. And this is before his crucifixion. Before his crucifixion, he said that. So he's predicting what would happen because of the cross, because of Easter, because of what we now know as Easter. Take heart, for I have overcome the world. I can't say it and not smile. And I would encourage the Christians out there to say that and to smile. Take heart, for I have overcome the world. So we can complain about our elites all we want, and we should, because most of them, again, are foolish, ridiculous, stupid, unserious, all the things, which I agree with. But we must never forget what Easter means. We can never forget what Easter means. And what Easter means, at its core, is what I just said. And I'll say it in a different way now. The tomb is empty. Jesus is alive. He is ruling and reigning. Evil will not prosper. He's coming back for us, and it can't come soon enough. Thank you for watching the Value Economics Show, everyone. Own the day. Open your mind. Happy Easter.